Thank you. And I do want to just note what an important technological advance we have with floating slides behind Contain's head, which is very exciting. Thanks, Contain, for always living in the future as you do in Fiji and bringing us there with you slowly but surely. Today's call, so welcome everyone. Today's call is the last GFAN call of the year, and we are already planning when we'll be in touch in the new year and what we need to talk about as we move forward into the year before the replenishment, as 2024 will become. Today we thought we'd take the opportunity to debrief with you, with the Secretariat and with some of the advocates who were present at COP28 about what took place and the dialogue and how the sort of first health and climate change day at COP went and what their feeling is coming out of that, kind of a hot take kind of moment for us with them. And then we have an HIV Policy Lab report presentation on same-sex sexuality and briefing. So we have Alice with us, who I think has joined us before for some of these kinds of information, but if not, we'll introduce her properly when she joins. So that's the agenda for today. And, depending on the time that we have after the discussion that we have today, we'll probably just close off with a few sort of final announcements, a few reminders. And what we're going to do shortly and throughout the call is just pop in the GFAN survey for the year that we're asking all of our membership to please take a moment to fill out. It helps us understand what kinds of calls, what kinds of information you like the most that GFAN does, or things that you would like to see more of in the next year. So we're going to pop a link to that into the chat and keep reminding you throughout the call. And then we'll start sending you harassing emails so that we get more respondents to that, because it is really a very helpful tool for us. So all of that to say, this is our sort of short agenda, but we do expect some discussion. So bear with us. And for right now, we're going to give the floor over to colleagues who were at COP. And we're going to start with Claudia Almada from the Global Fund Secretariat, who's just going to share their thoughts. And then we have a few colleagues joining us, as I said, advocates who were at COP, and we'll be talking to them, maybe getting an update about the statement that we shared with you all for signature and how that went when it was released, but coming back to them. So Claudia, if I could pass it over to you first. Welcome. Oh, look, it's a
Thanks,
very...
Katie. It's actually going to be Alois and Olivia.
Great.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. So I'm very happy to join you. I'm Olivia Ngo from Impact Santé Afrique and GFAN Francophone Africa, as well as CS4Me, Civil Society for Malaria Elimination. So very happy to be on the call and share with you some of our thoughts together with Alois. So I can start. Next slide, please. And so first of all, I want to thank the Global Fund for their support. They allow us as civil society and communities to attend COP28 and to participate in several key meetings, especially during the Health Day. So thank you thanks to the Global Fund, we were able to have community voices at COP28. So as you know, COP28 is the largest conference of parties convened by the United Nations, so UNFCCC, and a host country to discuss and negotiate on collective actions to adapt and mitigate the impact of climate change. So this year, the 28th year of the conference, it took place in Dubai, UAE. And for the first time, after 28 years, there was a dedicated day to health called the Health Day on December 3rd. So the Global Fund Partnership also then participated. We were 3 civil society advocates, me plus Basra from Mongolia, and also Alois from Tanzania. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the challenges, it was maybe one of the largest conferences we've been at, with over 70,000 people, participants, including advocates, countries, delegations, head of state, minister, etc. So it was absolutely huge. And also the physical space was very, very wide ranging and there was many different issues falling into the climate change agenda, such as agriculture, water, environment, finance, youth, gender. There were so many different issues. And also the access to the conference was a little bit challenging, especially in terms of accreditation, because you have different zones. You have the green zones, which is almost open to all the participants. And then you have the blue zone, which is open to mostly the decision makers, leaders, which is more restricted zone, especially for security reasons with the head of state, first AG, and other high-level officials. And so you have to get different passes for different zones, different days. So the logistic was a little bit difficult. And also because it was very large and broad in terms of issues, the branding opportunity were also extremely limited, as the opportunity to also get some of the messages for health across. So basically, you can see message around climate change, photos of, pictures of environment and issues, but very little about health, and also very little message about like how climate change affects human beings. It almost like climate change is only about the environment, but really the impact of climate change on like human beings. The messages weren't very, very clear. So despite a dedicated health day, so yes, the visibility of health-related issues were then very limited. And there was also no dedication of health, negotiation, point, and resolution. So this is maybe some lesson learned for the next COP, to have some concrete agenda and discussion and resolution point on health as well. Next slide, please. Yes, but the good news is that there was an agreement to operationalize a loss and damage fund due to climate change, and that can include health. So it was then the first day dedicated to health, with participation of Minister of Health from more than 50 countries. So this was good. There was also the UAE COP Health Declaration, signed by 123 countries. This was also a key achievement. And the adoption of a principle to bolster the financing for climate and health. So many agree and recognize that health is an issue, that the climate change crisis is a health crisis. So civil society, thanks to Alois, Baza, and many other advocates, and many of you, thank you also GFAN Global, GFAN Africa, Asia Pacific, and all the partners and CSOs who signed the letter, the civil society open declaration. And there was also funding and announcement, including by the Global Fund, and also congratulations to the Global Fund team for working on an agreement with Greenpeace at COP. And there was also opportunity for networking. So we were able to meet many advocates, countries, delegations, partners who are not in health, but who can potentially be ally in our Global Fund advocacy. Next slide, please. Yes, so loss and damage fund. So the COP countries reached an agreement on November 30th in Dubai to actually mobilize funds to develop countries facing the impact of climate change. And this follow another agreement from COP27 to establish the fund after developing countries had advocated for several years for its creation. So congratulations to them. And the breakthrough comes after country recently agreed to allow the fund to be temporarily housed at the World Bank. So climate related damages as expected to cost developing countries about 280 billion or 580 billion per year by 2030. So donor announced some initial pledge totaling around 549 million. And amongst those donors, you have UAE 100 million, EC 225 million, Germany 100 million, UK 76 million, US 17, and Japan 10 million. Next, so over to Alois to talk about the health declaration. Thanks.
Thanks, Olivier. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Yeah, thanks, Olivia, and thanks everyone for attending this meeting, and thanks to Global Fund for supporting our participation at COP28. Thanks to GFAN for echoing that and giving us this opportunity to share the feedback from our participation at COP28, which was, as Olivia highlighted, that it's the biggest or the largest conference on climate change globally, held every year once. And this year was at Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And next year it's already announced that it will be at Azerbaijan, something can pronounce correctly the name, so that's the next year's conference. And during this conference, being that it was the very first after 27 years, this being the 28th conference, to have Health Day at the center of the discussion. And during the Health Day, there was a Ministers of Health meeting, which among many other discussions was endorsing the declaration, the health declaration, where 123 countries had already signed or endorsed the declaration before that day. And after the day, I think 2 more countries have been added, that's Tanzania and China, making it 125, and hoping more other countries will be signing up this declaration. The declaration was supported by countries during the World Health Assembly, including Brazil, Malawi, UK, US, Netherlands, Kenya, Fiji, India, Egypt, Sierra Leone, and Yemen. And this declaration refers to the nexus of, or acknowledges the nexus of climate change and health, including building more climate resilient health systems, strengthening cross-sectional collaborations, and to reduce emissions and maximize health benefits for climate action, and increase finances for climate and health solutions. And the signatories, the countries that have signed this declaration, committed to incorporate health targets in their national determined contributions of the national climate plans, and improve international collaboration to address health risks due to climate change, including having more health discussions in the future Conference of Parties, COP. So it is also recognized that finance will be a significant driver for declaration success. And next slide, please. So there was also a climate health financing principles, or the guiding principles for financing climate and health solutions. This was co-created through a series of consultations by a joint partnership between COP28 presidents, the Global Fund, Green Climate Fund, and Rockefeller and World Health Organization, to unveil a set of principles that will bolster financing in climate and health, and mobilize additional finances in climate to foster innovation with transformative projects and new multi-stakeholder approaches. And these principles were earlier discussed during UNGA 78 in New York. And here during COP28, it was endorsed by over 40 financing partners and civil society organizations. And you can find them on the website, or I think can be shared here also on the chat. They're titled COP28 Guiding Principles for Financing Climate and Health Solutions. And the principles include recognition of the need to meaningfully engage communities and civil societies. And this is why we also took this opportunity during COP to call for to address the civil society's call to action through the letter that was signed by most of you, and we had over 300 signatures on that letter. Next slide. The open letter, as I just concluded here on the last slide, it was signed off with over 300 civil society organizations, and we'll be creating a link to circulate this letter for further dissemination, and also taking up the key messages to keep on amplifying through civil society organizations and communities. And the letter articulated the climate health nexus and how it impacts communities living with or affected with tuberculosis, TB, that's TB, HIV, and malaria. It also articulates that climate change is a human rights and equity issues which threatens to undo the progress we have made in fighting these big three diseases and constitutes the greatest health threat to humanity. In the letter, we call for meaningful involvement of the civil societies and community at all stages of responding to climate health crisis. And next slide, and if Basra is here, could you take over? Before, let me do the funding commitments. The funding commitments. Yes, thank you, Basra. Can you proceed from here?
Yeah, sure. So quite a lot of funding commitments were made at the COP28. So first of all, many organizations made finance announcement dedicating $1 billion to address the growing needs of the climate health crisis. So this included 0.5 billion by the Global Fund on community health workers related investment for Grant Cycle 7, and also an additional 0.5 billion was committed through the Wellcome Trust, BMGF, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Rockefeller, and the Green Climate Fund, and a host of others. Next, please. So, and also I can just add to the previous slide, there was a loss and damage fund was created with the initial contribution of 100 million and further augmented by high income countries to reach 400 million USD. But when I looked back at the website, it seems like a loss and damage fund have already, the countries have already, and the states committed to increase to around 700 million USD. Other significant commitments were included threefold increase in renewable energy, enhanced energy efficiency, and basically the phasing out of fossil fuels. Even 29 oil companies pledged net zero emissions by 2050. So in terms of the next steps, what would be the next steps? We need a shared vision plan for our encouragement in the climate space. So how can we strategically advance work on climate health nexus? How do we ensure meaningful engagement of communities and civil societies in this space? These are the questions we need to address for the next COP and further. We also need to develop key messages. So what is it that we collectively want to advocate for? We need to build our own capacity and knowledge on the climate health nexus and also work with the media to build theirs. We need to identify key milestones beyond COP to build up our engagement. And we need to identify key partners from communities and civil societies in the climate space to other sectors. Also, key to not government champions like Minister of Health of Malawi who were present in the COP28. Next, please. So
that's the last slide I have.
This is the last slide, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. That's really helpful. Why don't we just keep this next step slide up, Conte, while we move to discussion. I don't know, Claudia, if you wanted to add anything in. before we just open it up for discussion after those updates? No. Oh.
Thanks, Katie. I would just add that I think it was incredibly useful to go into this COP. It was the first COP for the Global Fund Partnership, and to do it jointly with civil society advocates was amazing, because we're all learning together now, and we need to figure out where and how we can add value to this agenda. And what we saw in COP was, as Olivia was saying, it is absolutely enormous, and there are so many different ways that we could come at it. So it really requires a more considered discussion about what our vision moving forward is, and how we want to approach that together. I see in the chat, for example, Delphine asking if there's a plan to engage in the longer term, because COP, it's really one milestone, but there is so much leading up to the actual conference that we need to think about and see, one, where do we actually have the ability to influence as a partnership? And then secondly, do we have the knowledge and the resources to do so? I don't think we can reach the answers to all of those questions on this call, but I think there's some things for us to start thinking of as we move into the new year. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Claudia. So I will just open it up for discussion at this stage. I would just note for colleagues who were at COP that there's a couple of questions. I see you answering one of them, and there's another one about, the sort of, did you get any clarity, I guess, or is there a longer term plan to engage in some of the other spaces that occur ahead of time of COP, and what that even looks like, I guess. And then around that letter, I sort of wonder if there's, perhaps an ask of advocates, maybe going into the new year to look at those 123 signatories to the declaration, the countries, and maybe there's a way through that civil society statement that was signed on to, to reach out to those countries and start a discussion around climate and health, where advocates are interested in doing so in their countries. There's sort of those two pieces coming out of COP. So that's just something for consideration, just wondering if, sort of what people think about that, but opening it up for general discussion or other questions, please feel free to use the raise hand function or note in the chat that you have a question you want to raise. Or if you can't join us on audio, at the moment, then please feel free to write your question into the chat. So opening it up for questions, comments, thoughts on 70,000 people at one conference. Seems crazy to me. No, everybody just limping through the end of the calendar year, perhaps. Alois, please.
Yes, thanks, Kate. Maybe just to add on the response, I think Claudia just answered the question that was asked on the chat, like long-term plan and on engaging in these processes, knowing that COP happens at the end of the year. Then I think it's really imperative that we come up with that long-term plan on how to engage through the processes from the preparatory stages until when COP is happening, rather than just coming at the end. As just Claudia said, this was more of a platform for us to learn about the processes, how it takes place, what are the logistics, and so on and so forth. But getting into the negotiation tables now, I think it's now critical to engage with, firstly, at the country level, to understand the country priorities, what they've submitted, for instance, for the GCF fund proposals, but also bringing the climate change agenda into CCM's discussion, but also all other platforms that we already have for health. Bringing that climate change agenda will be a good bridge towards engaging in the discussions and bringing and or supporting our countries to engage in the processes, as well as civil society. So it should start from the communities. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Delphine, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a noisy place, but so I've been following different COPs. It's COP Biodiversity, and I'm wondering whether you've given it a thought, because COP Biodiversity actually looks at issues like One Health, and they are due to have a negotiation next year on health, actually. So that's something when considering this process, something to think about as well. And indeed, I think if the intention is to influence the process, we have to look at resources and a broader plan, because coming just at a COP is a very hard time, as you just said. It's extremely competitive, and actually the process to influence is to be with negotiators and with the country delegations. Otherwise, it feels more like a scientific or civil society conference, but where it happens is on the negotiation room, which is everything but a conference, despite its name.
Yeah, thank you, Delphine. I bet you that's a good flag for people. I'm not sure, you know, who is monitoring all of these different processes and different entry points. So that's a good flag. Maybe we'll take Maria and Robin and then come back to Alois and Olivia and Bazar and Claudia and see if they have any final sort of reflections or thoughts after the questions. Maria and then Robin.
Hi everyone. Well, first of all, I want to apologize because if you've talked about this before, I have been away for a while, and if I didn't understand it properly, I'm sorry. But I think you mentioned that the Global Fund has an agreement with Greenpeace, or was it just my imagination?
No, it's with the Green Climate Fund.
Oh, sorry, I heard Greenpeace. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll find the link for that, Maria, and I'll pop it into the you know, the thingy.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Katie.
Words are failing me. Robin, please.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody. This is really very, very exciting, if not a little bit overwhelming, because well, so many people and the subject matter is just so vast. Just curious if you could say a few words about you know, discussions around the intersections, not only with climate and health and community leadership and engagement, but how gender fit in with all of these discussions, knowing that often women and are often the ones that bear the brunt of all of this and have a significant role to play within climate and health justice. Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Delphine, is that a new hand or just an old one? I think that may be residual. Okay. So
Katie, yes, maybe I can start first. Yes, apology. It's not Greenpeace, but I'm still getting used to all the new names. But so just to answer a few points, the first one is that there was a lot of civil society engagement before COP. So it didn't just start at COP, but civil society have tried to engage and meet with the different ministry and country delegation before COP to influence the health declaration as well. So for months and months prior the COP. So yes, so those discussion and negotiation happen at the country level with some of the civil society organizations who were involved in the health declaration that was published. Now is actually a good opportunity to actually have met so many new advocates, and many of them working in climate change have very little knowledge or information on how climate change affects health, particularly malaria. So, but many were very interested in that issue, and this is the opportunity to actually mobilize more allies to work together on resource mobilization for health due to climate change. For example, when I explain to them, because of climate change, we have malaria resistance. Now we have to have new tools that are more costly, and we have gaps in funding, and all of that affects community and health, and particularly women, to talk about gender aspects. So all of that is coming back to have a huge impact on communities that are the least responsible for climate change, and the communities paying the highest price are children and women mostly. So they all agree with that. They are all interested in that. So there's a good opportunity to have joint advocacy between climate change advocates and health advocates, even joint event, joint advocacy, joint negotiation before maybe COP like 30 to try to build something together and mobilize more resources to mitigate the impacts of climate change and health. So there's many opportunities now. We know a little bit more how the process goes, and we know a lot more about climate change advocates. We have a lot of contacts now, and we are sure now that they are all very much interested in joining forces. But for us too, to also ensure that we integrate some of the priority as well, but collectively we can definitely work together to advocate for reducing the causes of climate change, but also advocate for the mitigation of the impact of climate change on health. Many of our countries' delegation, they sign partnership on climate change, so we can also see how to influence that at the country level now to ensure that health is part of those new agreement and partnership that they were able to sign in the country pavilion. Yeah, so gender definitely is a huge theme that should be more integrated into our key messages or branding or issues related to health and climate change. But not even, if you even go out of gender, just the human face of climate change is not well represented there. So it's all about the nature, which is important, but very less about even humans being affected. So this is one of the first challenges, to put back the human face into the minds of everyone, to say that humans are also very affected by climate change, and their health in particular is one of the first way that they actually feel that climate change impact is on their health. And then we also can make directly a good link with gender issues. And I think the role of that we can all play is to really put back the humanity into that COP conference, so it becomes more we can humanize more this campaign, and we can make sure that our leaders are more conscious about the effect on human health. But it's huge opportunity, I think, to have more allies, and to also engage more countries, more ministry, for a multi-sectoral approach. There were many ministry of women's, of environment, not just Ministry of Health, but many other ministries that should be engaged in our advocacy for health and for malaria, TB, and HIV. So I don't know, Eloise or Kate, Claudia, if you want to add more. Thank you.
Yeah, any final comments from the other speakers on this today? Claudia?
Thanks, Katie. I would just add to, I mean, I think it was really important for us to be there. I think we got a better understanding of kind of the enormity of the challenge ahead of us. And we made also some really good connections with climate advocates that we'll be able to build on moving forward. But I think we also need to be very cognizant of the challenges around this space and the contradictions. There were quite some controversies around the COP28 president, for example, saying there's no science around the need to phase out fossil fuels. There was much more presence and engagement of people representing the oil and gas industries than there was, for example, Indigenous representatives. It said that the oil and gas reps outnumbered the Indigenous communities by 7-1. And just overall, things like what Olivia was saying at the beginning, the issues with access to the different zones really did make a difference, because then it was hard to actually be where the decision makers were, where negotiations were happening. Yes, you could be at your different side events, but accessing kind of where the power around COP lies, I think we've got a long way to go before we get there. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. And I do feel like, those next steps show us, there's still an awful lot of, work ahead to understand the space, to understand, as you said, some of those contradictions, and appreciate, Bazar, I see that you've unmuted yourself. I can give you 30 seconds to wrap up. We do need to get on to the second half of our call, but did you have anything else that you wanted to say to wrap us up today? But knowing that, we have our work cut out for us. And we'll have to be seeking and finding ways that we can leverage the information and the knowledge that you've garnered from this sort of first foray into COP to see what more we can do. Basra, did you have something final to say?
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. And just moving forward, beside this next step that we have collectively put together on the slide, we need increased representation from health advocates, community members, and affected population in the future COP meetings. And also for that, in order to achieve that strategically, we need to plan, potentially facilitated by the GFAN, to amplify voices from the community alongside research and healthcare workers. As my colleagues said, that there were much bigger representation from environment sciences, oil companies and stuff like that, not the health advocates and the community members. So just to add, some of the blue zone, which were only for government representation, where the most important meetings, all important forums has happened, were closed for civil society representatives.
Right.
So this is crucial for us for comprehensive participation and dissemination of key information. Thank you. On a personal note, just one said, I was able to meet with the climate envoy of Mongolia and his team, and we've talked about the tuberculosis. I was able to describe the TB situation in the country, addressing the effects of the recent pandemic and winter air pollution on vulnerable population. So as kind of as a next step, we agreed to have a plan to continue this discussion in Mongolia with the aim of potentially establishing a multi-stakeholder working group to address this issue. So that was a great achievement for me as a Mongolian advocate for TB, to meet high-level person of Mongolia. Otherwise, I would have never met in Mongolia. So that's where, yeah. So that was very beneficial, and also just in general participation for our civil society community advocates was highly beneficial for all of us, just to understand how comprehensive this global climate dynamics and the profound impacts on the well-being of communities, with particular health focus on health consequences.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always helpful when we find, those opportunities to do that advocacy, which is ultimately what we need to do to advance things within sort of our own countries and with our own government. So thank you for closing us off on that, and appreciate everyone who's joined and, asked questions and shared their experiences from COP. I do want to move us along because we're a little bit behind our planned schedule as usual, because we like to talk and we like to share thoughts and understand what we're talking about. But we did invite Alice Kayongo from the Center for Global Health Policy and Politics at the O'Neill Institute to share with us an update from a recent report around global decriminalization of same-sex sex. So Alice, I see your slides are coming up here for you, and I just wanted to invite you to get started.
Thank you so much, Katie, and hello to everyone, GFAN family. Pleased to be here today to present to you a report that has just recently been launched. It was launched mid-November, drafted by the HIV Policy Lab in collaboration with a global network of people living with HIV, with UNDP, and the HIV Policy Lab is actually an initiative that is housed or hosted by the Center for Global Health Policy and Politics at Georgetown University's O'Neill Institute. Sorry about that. I did not know that I hadn't turned on my video. Yeah, So just to start us off, I want to mention that a couple of years back, perhaps a decade or more years back, the Global Commission on HIV and the Law did join a couple of countries and voices in, ensuring that criminalizing same-sex relationships is actually an act that does affect the HIV response. And so the Global Commission on HIV did request that countries that do criminalize actually remove any criminalization policies that do undermine the HIV response in different countries. And as a result, we did see, the UN come up with the 10-10-10 goals by 2025. One of them being that countries, less than 10% of countries that have punitive and policy environment should deny or limit access access to services. So basically that less than 10% of these countries, should decriminalize. It also indicated that less than 10% of countries where people living with HIV and key populations experience, stigma and discrimination. Oh, I'm so sorry. And lastly, it did indicate that countries, less than 10% of countries with women living with HIV and key populations should experience gender inequality and violence. So the HIV Policy Lab, just briefly, is a collaboration between the academia, civil society, and the UN. And what we do at the HIV Policy Lab is that we do monitor, track, and measure, improvements in the HIV-related laws and policy environment in different countries around the world, over 194 countries around the world. And what we do actually is that we track over 33 different indicators over the 194 countries. For this specific report, we did look out at specifically one indicator on criminalizing or decriminalizing same-sex sexuality. And under this, we were looking at two main areas. The first area being the de jure content of the law, which is basically that, is the law existing? Is it recognized? And the second component that we were looking at was, is the country, avoiding prosecution? Basically, do they have a law in place? But if they have it, are they actually enforcing the law? So those are the two components that we were looking at for this specific report. And findings from, sorry?
I just interrupt that we're not actually seeing the slides move through. If you are trying to move them, we're still just seeing the main title slide. So if you were, so if you click on the ones on the left-hand side that you want to show, I think they'll show bigger for everyone. Sorry to interrupt you.
There's no worries. I'm actually sharing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sir, did you share the slides that we could go and put them up for you?
I could do that now.
It's okay, just continue. And we now don't see your slides. I'm sorry to have interrupted your flow of thought, but we can always share the slides after the call with everyone if it's just technically not working today, which sometimes happens.
I'm so sorry about that. Can you see them now?
Yes, we can see a regional state of play 1 now. So
okay, so I guess I'll not get into slide mode because it will be, yeah, it will distract me. So can you see the slide now, Katie, on global trends and decriminalization?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and welcome, Matt. So for this, sorry, I got distracted a bit by, when the slides were not showing. But just to let you know that one of the findings that we have seen, one of the trends that we have seen is that, first of all, at the start of the AIDS response, we had over 120 countries that were criminalizing same-sex relationships. However, as of 2023, the trend has changed. It is now 129 countries that do not criminalize same-sex sex relationships. And for us, this is a huge progress, seeing that at the start of the response, it was 120 countries criminalizing, but then today we are seeing that that has changed, and instead we are seeing 129 countries not criminalizing. And as a result, we also see that over 63% of all people living with HIV actually live in countries where same-sex sex is not illegal in those countries. And yeah, 63%, more than half of people living with HIV, that's quite, progress being made. But we also see that, in countries where we have policies that criminalize, over 24 countries actually are reporting that, there has been no recent prosecution, and that represents about 37% of all countries that do criminalize. So here we see that, the countries are not, they are not enforcing the law in as much as other countries, that criminalize are actually enforcing the law and bringing in very harsh penalties. We also, the report also indicates that, a couple of countries, especially in the past, 5-6 years, over 13 countries have actually removed laws on criminalizing same-sex relationships. We see that, this actually started in 2018, 2019, and the majority being seen between 2022 and 2023, with Mauritius being the latest that has actually decriminalized same-sex relationships. There is a lot of progress globally, with a lot of progress actually happening in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. We have progress happening in Africa as well, as you can see, some from West Africa, from East and Southern Africa, also from the MENA region. And just picking out on Africa, for example, we see a couple of countries, over 20 countries that have that do not criminalize. But we also see, on my extreme right, a couple other countries that do criminalize and actually do have harsh penalties. And then we have those in the middle that, they have the law, but then they are silent on the law. And the map here that I present to you just basically summarizes what I have presented, with countries that do not criminalize, those that have the law but are not enforcing it, and those that are criminalizing with very harsh penalties. We talk about the public health impact, and here what we have seen, or what the findings indicate, is that globally, for HIV prevention, gay men and other men who have sex with men are 11 times more likely to have HIV than the general population, the general adult population. And transgender people are 14 times higher. They have a chance 14 times higher than the global population to have HIV. But at the same time, in different regions, for example, in selected African countries, we realize that in countries that are not criminalizing, men who have sex with men are 7 times 7 times more likely to have HIV, while countries where there is criminalization, men who have sex with men are 25 times more likely to have HIV. But we don't only look at, men who have sex with men. We are also looking at knowledge about HIV. We are looking at virus suppression, and we realize that in countries where we have there is no criminalization, the likelihood that people are aware of their HIV status is 11 times higher than the general than other countries where there is criminalization. And virus suppression in non-criminalizing countries is 8 times higher than in countries where there is no criminalization. And in summary, we say that criminalization is definitely linked to higher HIV rates. Criminalization drives inequality in HIV. It undermines HIV response at the population level, and it hinders, it hinders accurate public health planning and adversely affects health outcomes. Many of these we have actually known over the years, but in all honesty, we did not have hardcore evidence to support the work that, to support the trends that we have been seeing. And this report does provide us with trends. Seeing that we are running out of time, I'll just quickly go through the fact that, despite the progress that we have seen, we also see, there's a lot of peril amidst this progress, with countries imposing very harsh penalties, including death penalties. We see that health workers in some countries are actually arrested for providing services, or even just knowledge of, knowing that someone is in a same-sex relationship does affect, someone is arrested for knowing and not reporting. And very, very quickly, I will state that there are a couple of case studies that we have indicated in this report, case studies on decriminalization. We have case studies on Angola, Mauritius, Singapore, Botswana, and several others, as you will see. But also to mention that putting all this aside, decriminalizing same-sex relationships does have a positive benefit on the economy of any given country, where we are seeing a significant positive impact on GDP in countries that are not criminalizing, and we also see strong rights obligations. And lastly, given the time constraint, we do have lots of lessons for the AIDS response. And just to pick out a few of them, one is, to indicate the fact that investing in policy change and law reform efforts does benefit the AIDS response by far. And decriminalizing alone is actually not sufficient, but we should try as much as possible to address the broader enabling laws and policies, and more so invest in community services, invest in advocacy to ensure that we are not seeing any more criminalization of same-sex relationships, all in a bid to fight the HIV pandemic, but also to maintain the gains that we have been able to achieve over the years. I will stop here for now and hand over to you, Katie, for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to say that I feel like, this is a great conversation to be ending our last call of the year with, in terms of, it has felt a little bit challenging this year. For a number of reasons in the global response, but there's having this kind of evidence that kind of shows the positive linkages between decriminalization and outcomes, public health outcomes, rights outcomes. I'm not sure we can call it a causal link with GDP there, but an interesting one is just, it's a more positive way to end the year than I'm sure that I expected. So thank you so much, Alice, for sharing this. I'll pop the link to the report again into the chat, but does anybody have any quick questions or comments around this quick overview of this report that we've received? not and a comment in the chat for you, Alice. I hope that it will be possible for us to receive these slides and share them with our usual recording of the call. Thank you, Alice. And perhaps, you know, maybe in the new year we can bring you back in or have a smaller call for those who are particularly interested in this about how to take the lessons from this report and apply it to our advocacy around, you know, in the coming year, but also in those cases where we know that we are having strong challenges in terms of fighting back against repressive laws. So without anybody popping up with questions today, I just appreciate the work behind this by you and the team. And thank you for sharing this with us. And I think we should find a way to come back to this in the new year, because as good as it is to hear at the end of the year, it's also a great way to start the new year in terms of thinking of ways to use this in our advocacy. So thank you, Alice. I'm going to just pass it over to Quentin if he is, if his sound is working again for him, and he's going to wrap us up for this year.
Yes, thanks a lot, Katie, and thanks a lot, Alice, for presentation. So my internet is not super stable at the moment, so if I drop out, apologies. We're about to reach the end of our time for this last call of the year. We did want to ask all of you to sign on to our end of year survey. We have sent it a few times over. We really use those surveys to try to improve our work from one year to the next. And so if you get the chance, please take the time to take a look. I will just pop a link in the chat right now. The other thing I wanted to say was that we have started scheduling our calls for the next year. The next call will be on January the 25th, so in a little bit under a month. A little bit over a month, sorry. And we're looking forward to see all of you there. I'm just popping the link in the chat for the survey.
Priyanka beat you to it.
Right. And yeah, and that will be it for our call today. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today, this morning, this afternoon, tonight, and looking forward to see you all next year.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care. We'll see
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks very much. Bye.
And fill out the survey.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We will.
Thank
I
you.
will.